Hey y'all, I'm Perez, founder of Bravely Go, and today we are going to talk about mommunes. If you know me even just a little bit in real life, I have definitely brought up the idea of communal living with you more than once. I am obsessed with communal living. I think it is such a good idea. I think it is the light. I think it is the way, the truth, the path we should all be walking. And additionally, I think all of us paying to live alone or with just one other person, our romantic partner, is dumb, annoying, expensive, and slowly making all of us miserable. And now, the New York Times agrees with me. This article on mommunes caught my eye, and today, we are going to be diving into America's cost of living crisis, the idea of the nuclear family, communal living, and the creation of the mommune. Please support our channel and content by becoming a patron. We do not run ads or sponsorships all that often, and so we are able to bring you well-researched and independent content because of our patrons. Patrons get exclusive event discounts, help us choose which financial topics to cover on social media, and get access to an exclusive AMA with me, Perez. Choose a level that works within your budget, you know we love a budget around here, and help keep our small, women-owned business up and running. Find the link in our description. A mommune refers to a home where two single mothers of two non-biologically related kids are living together platonically to raise their children, to co-parent together, even though they are not married and not biologically related. Here in the United States, it's been hard to be a parent for a really long time. But parenthood, and specifically motherhood, took a major beating during the COVID-19 pandemic. Daycares shut down. Parents had to work full-time from home while looking after their children or while trying to teach their children. And since everywhere in the world, from the grocery store to the daycare to the playground, had become a scary and potentially dangerous place, families, and especially parents, were stuck inside trying to manage everything. And for single parents during the pandemic, forget it. Truly hell on earth. No one there to help share the burden of doing the laundry and changing the diapers and making the food, as well as, working the full-time job that pays for the diapers and the food and all the things. This huge expense of trying to work full-time, mom full-time, and still somehow be a human drove a lot of mothers to the brink during the pandemic. And it also drove some moms to the mommune. In April 2020, with pandemic lockdowns in full force, longtime friends Holly Harper, a marketing executive, and Heron Hopper, an attorney, were both newly divorced and managing remote work and their children's virtual school from tiny apartments in Washington, D.C. Going it alone was feeling like an increasingly uphill battle, so they changed course, pooled their finances, and bought a home to share instead. For Ms. Hopper, 46, a mommune offered a way to share the heavy burden of juggling home and career without a romantic partner, as well as a path towards homeownership post-divorce. Both Holly and I have always been voyeurs when it came to real estate, and we were like, why not? She said. Sharing a home, added Ms. Harper, offers single mothers a key thing that is often taken away when their relationship falls apart: economic mobility. I loved this quote because right there, right at the end, it says the quiet part out loud. It takes economic flexibility and economic mobility to be a good parent. You have to have disposable income and the opportunity to both save for yourself, for your retirement, and the money to spend on your child's needs in order to be a good parent in the United States today. And today, communal living offers parents a little bit of that, as it always has. From communes to intentional living spaces to religious organizations to immigrant families doing intergenerational living, communal living is not some new trend created by social media or the New York Times. Humans have lived together ever since we came out of the caves and started roaming around, largely because there's safety and help in numbers. This is true when we were hunters and gatherers, and it's true now in our consumerist society. In the United States, intergenerational living is much more common among non-white homes. Though arguably the first white colonies here in the US were communal living. White people were fleeing Europe where they felt their religious beliefs were being persecuted, and they arrived in a land where indigenous Americans were already also living communally. The Iroquois people practiced communal living pre-European colonization. They owned property together and worked together. Women performed difficult work in large groups, such as going from field to field helping one another work each other's lands. Iroquois women of each agricultural group would select an old but active member of their group to act as their leader for that year and would follow her directions. The men organized hunting parties where they used extensive cooperation to kill multiple animals at once. One first-hand account told of a hunting party that built a large brush fence in a forest to form a V. The hunters set a fire across the open side of the V, forcing the animals to run towards the point where the hunters awaited them. They could kill 100 deer at a time by such a plan. Communal living, helping you get that dinner on the table. More recently, the hippies of the 1960s and 70s often left major cities for more rural areas where they were able to do things like live off the land and live by a joint set of shared beliefs. And today there are many operating communes and collectives across the United States. So why did we stop living in communal spaces as the default? How did we kind of separate ourselves into the way that we live now? It all comes down to that problematic period in American history called the Industrial Revolution. In the mid to late 1800s, the Industrial Revolution started, and this brought people off of their family farms and off of the smaller homes where they lived intergenerationally into bigger cities where the jobs were. This is where we begin to see a breakdown in communal living. While boarding houses were common in cities for factory workers to live in, these were individuals renting rooms. People lived in the same houses and they ate at the same table, but they weren't working together towards a joint collective goal. They were just a collection of individuals sharing a space, much like roommates are today. And the goal for a lot of these factory workers was to be able to send money back home to their family or be able to buy their own farm or home themselves with their factory wages one day. From there, as cities began to grow, as workers continued to pour in, single-family homes became the focus of development. People wanted then, as a lot of people want now, their own space. They didn't want to have to share a wall with a neighbor. They didn't want to have to smell what their neighbor is cooking. And most importantly, suburbs began to be built because white people didn't want to be around non-white people. In 1934, the Federal Housing Administration was created and provided mortgages and mortgage insurance to house buyers and lenders. And at its founding, from its outset, the FHA refused to insure mortgages in neighborhoods of color. This is a process known as redlining. The FHA was subsidizing builders who were mass-producing entire subdivisions for whites, with the requirement that none of the homes be sold to African Americans. So now we have white people literally separating themselves from non-white people in houses that literally separate them from other families, in towns that require a car to get to, obviously further dividing us all and making communal living all but impossible. There's a phrase in the United States, and I'm sure versions of it exist in other places in the world, that says, "It takes a village to raise a child." But what do you do when you want to have a kid and you don't have a village because you had to move out of your parents' home, out of the town that you grew up in, because there were no jobs there, and you had to put 1,500 miles between you and everyone you know? What do you do when you live in a city where you don't have any close family and friends, and your kid gets out of school at 3, but you work until 6? Which brings me to that old chestnut, cost of living in the United States. I feel like I talk about this almost every single video I make, but that's because this is a very expensive country to live in. And it's even more expensive for parents, particularly mothers. The USDA estimates that parents can expect to pay between $15,438 and $17,375 a year raising a child in 2022. This can vary based on region and household income level. That's $312,750 over the course of 18 years, not accounting for inflation. Now add in paying for housing, healthcare, transportation, and saving for your own retirement, and you understand that parents have a lot of financial stress. And we live in a culture where the standard for success is essentially do everything by yourself, never ask for help, raise your children in a bubble protecting them from the scary outside world, and do all of this on your own dime. Asking for help from other people or from the government is severely looked down upon here. If you, God forbid, are like me and you have to grow up on food stamps, you will be referred to as a welfare baby or a welfare queen if you're a woman. Just take it from me, people are really, really mean about that. And these rising cost of living and parenting is helping feed the homelessness crisis that we're experiencing in the US. Parents and children make up 30% of homeless people in the United States. In January 2021, an estimated 161,070 people in families or 51,000 family households were identified as homeless. In January 2021, approximately 17,337 people in families were living on the street, in a car, or in another place not meant for human habitation. Families are struggling with inflation. They are struggling with corporations raising the prices of their products, and they are struggling with cost of living. And since women are up against the gender pay gap as well as the gender wealth gap, they are being hit particularly hard. So enter the mommune. Moms living together, pooling assets, sharing time, sharing resources, and defining a family home structure outside of the heteronormative family. Some people building mommunes see this as a permanent lifestyle choice, while others see it as a means to an end, financially speaking. Ms. Winship, her colleague, was facing a similar struggle. She had lived in the Middle East for 13 years, but when the pandemic hit, she was newly separated and alone with her son, now 12. I told her I wished we all lived in a place where the kids could play together, Ms. Winship said. In September 2021, they began renting a 3-bedroom apartment in a gated community, splitting the rent evenly and taking turns cooking and watching each other's kids. The arrangement isn't forever. Ms. Winship and Ms. Dillon both have new partners and plan to eventually move out and start new lives with them. But after living through a pandemic in a foreign country together, they say their partnership has been essential. For some of these moms, the mommune has allowed them to find financial stability in a way that the normal way of doing things was never going to offer them. It's also allowed them and their children to build lifelong friendships. And that's honestly the coolest part of mommunes to me, is not just the financial benefits that can come from this, but the relationship building that can come from this for both the parents and the kids. Can you imagine being 6 years old and getting to live with your best friend for 5, 6, 7 years, or until you both turn 18? That's such an interesting and such a wonderfully big way of living. It's such a fantastic way to introduce yourself and your kids to the idea that other people aren't the scary enemy, other people are your friends, other people help you pick up your toys after you're done, other people learn algebra with you, other people can be helpful, and other people can be cool. When it comes to communal living, there is truly no one size, shape, or way of doing it. People build communes and people live communally in a million different ways. And no one says that you have to live in a mommune forever. But it seems to me pretty clear that in a country that is deeply hostile to parents and their financial needs, communal living offers a really abundant way of approaching a very expensive and very stressful thing, raising another human. So that's my thoughts. Let me know what you think of mommunes. Are you a part of a mommune? I would love to hear from a mommune member. Try saying that 10 times fast. And if you enjoyed this video, as always, give us a thumbs up, make sure to hit subscribe, and I will see you next Monday.